Internships. It's kind of tricky, and so we're going to just talk to you about some strategies that will kind of help you along the way. Something that will both kind of help you and maybe hinder you a little bit is the fact that we're grad students, right? So we kind of know what we're passionate about and kind of know, or are supposed to know, the general course that we kind of want our life to go from this point out. And so that's going to help you because you kind of know what you want. You know what you want to do, the special area that you want to be working in, but also it comes along with the added stress of finding that and like finding a place to actually exercise those skills that are going to help you get to where you want to go. And so with that in mind, most grad students tend to kind of find their own internship through networking and that kind of thing. But we have people here who went on organized programs through the school and through other programs, and also people who found their own internships. So really, we're proof. We're your comrades in arms, and we all did international internships, so we're here to help you kind of get there. One thing that you want to keep in mind is starting early, and you guys are all here. It's not even October yet, so you've all got an early start, so pat yourselves on the back for that. And then one thing to remember is just to be patient. You know, sometimes it's going to take you a little digging to figure out exactly what you want. But when you do, it's worth it. You know, it's like worth that extra effort to figure out where you want to be, and it's worth the experience that you're going to have in the end. And then also be kind of flexible. I mean, you know exactly what you want, and maybe you want to work with this one special population in this tiny island off the coast of someplace your mother's never heard of. Well, keep in mind that you might have to be flexible a little bit. You know, maybe you want to work with a different population in the same place, or maybe you want to work in a different place, you know, with the same population. Just keep in mind that sometimes you're not going to find exactly what you want, but as long as it's there and it's helping you in your career goals, sometimes, you know, you just have to make those sacrifices, depending on how important it is to you. And also a thing to remember as far as that's concerned is when you start looking, figure out what you're willing to compromise on. Like, I have to work in Kenya. Like, no matter what, I have to work in Kenya. Or, you know, I have to work with this population of people, and it doesn't matter where. So kind of keep in mind when you start looking what you are absolutely adamant about and what you're willing to compromise a little bit about. And then sell your strengths. Like when you're networking, when you're applying for things, when you're interviewing, make sure you sell your strengths and kind of know what you're after. And really go in there and make sure that they know who you are and what you're working towards, and how you can help them and how they can help you work towards those common goals. And then make sure you follow instructions on applications. That's kind of a small thing, but it does help a lot. You know, sometimes you forget to submit a cover letter. Sometimes it's something as simple as that, just misreading one line. And so really put some work into it and make sure that you do everything you need to do. And then my last bit of advice is to go prepared. Make sure that you prepare yourself for your internship, do some background on it. Make sure you show up and you kind of know and you're ready to get started. So you don't have to kind of spend the first few weeks of your internship sort of learning the ropes. Make sure you're as prepared as possible when you get there. All right, so those are just some basic tips. Now we're going to move on to our panel. The first three panelists are people who all went on kind of organized trips and formal application programs, and then the last three are going to be people who sort of found their own internships through networking, through searching, and that kind of stuff. And they're going to basically tell you about the process they went through to get where they are today. So first we'll start with Mary, and she'll tell you about how she found her internship.
So my name is Mary, and I spent the summer with the State Department in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I don't know if you guys have had experience with this, but that was done in the most sterile, least networky way possible. I applied, I sent a cover letter and a resume through usajobs.gov, which, as far as I can tell, is often this like black hole where you send things and nothing goes. And I did this mostly, honestly, out of a due diligence idea. I was like, okay, well, obviously nobody reads these things, but I'll send them an application anyway because it's the right thing to do and it's good practice and blah, blah, blah. But about 2 or 3 months later, I got a call from a number that I didn't recognize that was, turns out, in the Congo, calling me and offering me the internship. So I think important things to think about if you want to do the State Department is that, so surprisingly enough, that website goes somewhere. I think it often doesn't. I'm not guaranteeing that it will, but as it turns out, you don't actually have to have special connections or like a guy on the inside for this sort of thing. You can do it this like very formalistic way. The second thing is that the deadline for state is really, really early. It's much earlier than anything else I did. I think it's like mid-October, maybe. Could be as late as early November, but you've got limited time even at this point. So it's time to start getting your act together if that's something you're interested in. In terms of strategy, I would say the things that I did that I think helped me get the job was you bid strategically. So if you want to work at state, you kind of have this, they present you with this huge long list of places you can work, which include all embassies and consulates basically everywhere in the world. Maybe an exception for Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, like conflict zones. I'm not sure about that, but virtually everywhere else. Not to mention all of their desks in DC, not to mention their mission to the UN in New York. Honestly, it's 20 pages of places you could bid on, and you're allowed to bid on 2. So I picked one that sounded the most interesting. I picked 2 that sounded interesting to me. One was the legal office for the UN admission, the State Department's representative to the United Nations mission in New York. Because I'm at law school, and that appealed to me from a legal career point of view. And the second one I bid on was the Congo, which I decided not necessarily because Kinshasa was my #1 place to spend 3 months, but because I had the language of the country. I speak French, and I had actually previously been to the Congo. I have a background in international development, and so I thought that made me a much more competitive candidate for a place like that, especially considering I had a feeling that there probably wasn't a huge flood of applications for this country. So that's something I would recommend. It's not like spending the summer in Paris wouldn't be I'm not even saying it would be better, but it would be very different, and my guess is it's significantly more competitive. So I would say bid strategically is a really helpful thing. You don't, I believe, get the choice of what you do within the embassy. So I worked in the embassy. I worked in the public diplomacy sector, which includes the attaché de presse and the cultural attaché. The other interns, I think there were maybe 6 at the embassy, worked in the political department and the econ department. So you kind of get placed within the embassy, I think according to their needs, possibly according to your strengths. I don't really know how that works. It was largely graduate students, and I think there's a few undergrads. But I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, so in terms of special people to call and inside connections, I have nothing for you guys, but you can do it the old-fashioned way. The other thing is, I don't want to take up any more people's time, and these people can speak to internships that they found on their own better than I can. But because state takes a really long time to get back to you, in the meantime between applying really early and hearing sometime in mid-December, I think, I had applied for and gotten offers for a couple other internships in Africa, because I know I wanted to be in that region. And those I found just by bootstrapping through, Duke has a database of NGOs. I just pulled through pages and pages of NGOs that I sorted by continent, and just cold called the ones that seemed interesting to me, and kind of pitched myself and said, look, I want to come work for you for free. Here are my skills. Can I please come and not cost you any money and hang out with you guys for the summer? And a lot of them didn't get back to me, but 2 did. And so I had other options in Windhoek, Namibia, and Kampala, Uganda. So I can talk to you guys about that later. Well, I can't actually, but you can email me and I can talk to you about it later. But otherwise, I'll let people continue.
Well, hello. My name is Daniel Chavez-Yenter. I'm in the School of Public Health, Health Behavior, Health Education specifically. My program was through MHIRT, which is actually an acronym for the Minority Health Inequalities Research Training Grant. It's a program run through the Center of Human Growth and Development here at the University of Michigan in North Ingalls, if anyone's interested in going to the office. This project specifically is anyone interested in health. It's minority health inequality specifically that we're looking at. And I want to say that it's not specifically restricted to Chile. I was in Chile and South America specifically, but I had many friends who were in different locations. I had a friend in Jamaica, friend in Mongolia, China, Uganda, Ghana, and I believe that's it. I can't remember. There might be another country, but we were all in different locations. But primarily, this is a program specifically for anyone interested in health inequalities, health disparities, and working in an international setting. Specifically, strategies, it's really not tough. Luckily on this sheet you have a contact. If you contact Ms. Tumulin Johnson, she'll send you all the materials you need to apply for this. Luckily, the deadline is not until November 19th, so if you get a start on it now, this is probably the best time to get a start on it and have an idea of where you would want to go, what you would want to study, because similar to Mary's kind of selection criteria, or the list of places you can go, they have a list of different projects in all the different countries. So it's very interesting to see what in particular what area of health you're interested in doing. You can see what each country offers in that particular area. So definitely apply by her. For graduate students though, there is one difficult, more challenging. It's mostly an undergraduate program, but for graduate students, they require that you write a proposal of no less than 5 pages, suggesting coming up with an idea for a study. Another requisite for the graduate students in MHIRT is that you have to write a paper in near publishable form. So actually, after my experience, we're actually hoping to publish my study that I did this past summer. Hopefully within the next year, we're hoping to publish my results. So that's basically it. The big advantage is that this is a fully funded program, so I highly recommend it. And if you're interested in health, what I did in particular was working at INTA, which is the Instituto de Nutrición y Tecnología de los Alimentos, which is the Institute for Food Technology and Nutrition. My area was focused on cardiovascular risk within Chilean adolescents in relation to their physical activity behaviors, and their dietary habits. And so what I did mostly was I did a lot of statistical analysis, and I was basically just analyzing data most of the time. So my internship probably wasn't exciting as, let's say, Mary's or any of my cohort here. Mine probably was not as very exciting, but I learned a lot about statistical analysis. I learned very much how to design a study, how to go about implementing everything, and really my Spanish really improved in this program to really improve in kind of more of a quantitative vocabulary in Spanish. So for anyone interested in health specifically, this is the program for you. I really highly recommend it. And I can talk more about it later. If you have any questions, feel free to email me as well.
Okay, I'm Christie, and I am in the School of Social Work. I'm in the Global Activity Scholars Program in the School of Social Work, which is a scholarship program that you sort of have to take a specific curriculum related to global social work, and then over the summer you have to do an internship as your second field placement for the school. So I guess I felt a little bit limited. I know that Emily, when she was introducing things, noted that as graduate students, a lot of you probably have some ideas in mind of where you want to go, what you want to do, and you might feel confined by the existing programs out there that will do internship placements. So in my school, they have partnerships with 5 different locations in 5 different countries, and they work specifically with programs in each of those countries. So I only had 5 options of where I could go for my internship this summer. And so 2 of them were with volunteer placement organizations. Cross-Cultural Solutions is an organization that will take volunteers or people who want to be interns from any country in the world and place them with community-based organizations or health organizations in there are 12 developing countries that they work with. And so I selected to work in South Africa in the end this summer. And I guess my strategy for that choice, I was kind of choosing between South Africa and Peru, and I really wanted to go to Peru because most of my other experience has been in Latin America. And I thought I would just be comfortable there. I would build skills that would pertain to my future. I kind of see a future for myself there. But I was trying to do this thing on the side. So also within the program, once I selected a country, I would be limited by what project, because each site only had really one internship idea. So the one in Peru, I would have been working in an elderly care home, basically serving meals, and I thought that that was not going to advance my social work education in any way. So I was trying to do like a special studies through my school where I could do my own research while I was there. In my proposal, my school just sent to South Africa just to see what would happen. And it turns out that the directors of cross-cultural solutions in South Africa were really interested in the proposal that I had written. And so they sort of bid on me to come there instead of going to Peru. And so I selected for the population that I wanted to work with, the opportunity that I wanted, over location. So I guess that's kind of how I ended up there. So while I was in South Africa, I was working directly with cross-cultural solutions to analyze the evaluation procedures that they have for their volunteers who go out into placement. So my interest is the impact that volunteers have in the communities where they're working. And Cross-Cultural Solutions, as a large international organization, only really does evaluation on sort of the satisfaction of the volunteers with the services provided. And Cross-Cultural Solutions South Africa and myself both wanted to know really what impact the experience was having on the volunteers themselves and the impact that it was having on the communities where the volunteers were placed. So that's the evaluation project that I did this summer. Funding, I think, is where I'm a little bit different. My program was not fully funded, and in fact, the program fee for Cross-Cultural Solutions for a 12-week program is close to $8,000. Plus I had to pay U of M tuition over the summer, plus I had to pay for my plane ticket to get there, and all of the other expenses that you have in country just from, living there, wanting to go out, experience the culture. So I needed to find a lot of funding. Fortunately, the School of Social Work recognized that it was going to be very expensive, and so they gave us a list of, different opportunities through U of M that we could apply for. And also working in the International Center, I had access to lists of places where I could apply. Several of them were within the School of Social Work. So how many people are in social work? Anybody? Just a couple of you? Okay. So the Office of Global Activities has a list, and there are many opportunities actually within the School of Social Work that can support international internships. And I think every department has something along those lines. And then the International Institute has individual fellowships that can also support people. So I applied to several within my school. I applied to the individual fellowships. I applied, I don't even know where else I applied. Center for Education of Women, I ended up going to last minute when I realized that I didn't get any of the other funding that I had applied for. So there were a list of them. I did get one through the School of Social Work, but I was surprised. I applied for so much. I put a lot into my applications for funding. I had everybody in the International Center read my applications. I thought for sure, these are really solid. It's really in line. The project I was doing was really in line with my future goals. So I thought people would really respect that and want to support that. So I got one. I didn't get the others. So I guess I would just recommend do what you can, apply for everything. And I guess, like I said, make sure that your application really shows why you're doing what you're doing. I think as grad students we have an advantage in that we kind of have an idea of what we want to do. We don't necessarily have an idea of what we want to do, and that becomes more clear through an international internship, I think. But in the application process, show why you think it's going to become more clear through your application.
I'm Adam Byrnes. I'm a dual degree student in the School of Business and the School of Natural Resources and the Environment. And I think I'm the dividing line here is that now we're talking about, this is the dividing line right here, is that the three of us sort of found our own. But I actually think I might be different in this, but I think we would all agree that you should just try to do both. I think try and go through the official routes. It's, I always joke because I think it's easier, but it's actually not. But because you have, they come to campus or they send an application and you submit it, whereas we have to sort of, or at least in my case, you have to sort of network to it and then convince the company they want you. I'll talk about that in a second. But the real strategy, I think, is to try and do both. Throw your net out as wide as possible. I'm interested in energy and entrepreneurship, and talk about limiting, there are few programs that support that. But I knew when I came to business school that I wanted to go to 2 countries. One was India, and the other's China. And it took me about a year to figure out how to get to India, which is where I was this summer, working for a startup in Bangalore, doing energy access work, which is essentially there's 400 million Indians who do not have energy at all. They use kerosene and other fuels for cooking and for electricity. And the startup I worked for has a technology that can help change that and solve that problem. The big strategy I used to get to that point was simply networking. And I think that certainly in the business school that's sort of the coin of the realm, but it gets passed around a lot. But what is networking? For me, it was just talking to people I knew, to ask them if they would connect me to people they knew, and then to ask them about what they do. It's really not that hard. It's really not, it just takes effort, but no more effort necessarily than filling out an application. And I actually enjoy talking to as many different people about what they do as possible. And through that, it's sort of the self-fulfilling prophecy where at the end of it you have a better network because you reached out to people and asked them questions. LinkedIn is a great tool. Just type in a name of the company that you are interested in and see who you know is connected. And 50% of the time you'll know someone and you'll be surprised who they're connected with that knows those companies. So that was how my strategy worked. I had a classmate who was in India last year in New Delhi. We sat down for an hour, I bought her coffee, we talked about what her experience was like, and at the end of it I said, hey, would you mind connecting me with some folks in India to talk about what I want to do? I think I Skyped with somebody, and then it was like a 30-minute conversation, and yet she felt comfortable enough to then send my information on to a listserv, which then made its way down to the people who would eventually hire me. But that process took a while. It took a while to find the right person who knew the right people. I didn't get my internship until early May. So it felt a little nerve-wracking at the end, but I knew what I wanted, and I went for it and got it. So that's the other thing, is I think someone mentioned patience. Patience is key. I don't know about your programs, but in mine, a lot of people get their internships starting now through February, and then it's like 95% of the class, so it feels like you're behind. If that happens in your program, don't feel that way. Don't follow the herd. Do what you want to do, because you will have a great time over the summer. I think we can talk later about what we all did, but start early. And then I also was helped out by the William Davidson Institute. I think there's a mention of it on one side of the flyers. They fund programs strictly for business, or for any grad student, but it has to be that you're consulting with or working with a business. And it has to be in 2 primary fields, either helping the base of the pyramid, which is sort of how I fitted my energy. For those of you who aren't familiar with the terminology of base of the pyramid, it's if you think about incomes throughout the world, there's people at the top, like all of us here in the United States, and then there's folks at the bottom who make $2 a day. And so the William Davidson Institute, also known as WDI, their program is to try and help businesses trying to serve those communities. And then the other shoot that you can get internship funding for is for healthcare, but it has to be business related to healthcare. So for instance, I had a friend who sort of had my dream job, except that it was healthcare. He was in India for 6 weeks, and then in China for 6 weeks, because he was working with General Electric on their healthcare side. So start early, network like hell, and have fun.
All right, well, my name is Kelsey Duinkerken. I'm in the School of Information, and I spent my summer at the Nelson Mandela Center of Memory in Johannesburg in South Africa. And I think my experience is completely different in that I had the easiest internship search ever. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to work in an archive that was progressive, that thought outside of the box, that connected to the community, was really involved in transparency and citizens' rights and human rights. So I knew of 3 archives in South Africa that did this. SAHA, the South Africa History Archive in Johannesburg, the Nelson Mandela Center of Memory at the Nelson Mandela Foundation, also in Johannesburg, and the Mayabuya Archives at Robben Island off of Cape Town. So I just cold emailed all 3 of them, told them why I was interested in what they were doing, why I was interested in South Africa. Heard back from SAHA and the Nelson Mandela Center. Both of them on their initial email back said they were really interested, wanted to hear more, sent them my resume, was offered positions at both within a week of my first email, and ended up accepting the one at the Nelson Mandela Center of Memory, which was a really great experience. I don't know if we talked too much about what we did, but it started out as in 1999 Nelson Mandela's post-presidential office, and in 2004 was changed to an archive with the mandate that it would tell Mandela's story and tell all of the story, not try to whitewash anything, but to also reach out to the community. So we did things like Mandela Day, which is July 18th, Community Service Day, held dialogues, outreach, things like that. So yeah, I think you just have to sometimes get lucky, like I did, but really know what you're interested in and go out and actually send those emails, call those people, and like not be nervous about it, because it can actually really work out. And in terms of funding, I would say apply to as many things as possible, and like has been mentioned so far, start as early as possible. I think a lot of the deadlines were in January or February for a lot of the really good fellowships and scholarships. I know I applied to ones through the International Institute, the Wallenberg, as well as a number through my department and other departments. So I also applied to Department of Afro-American and African Studies, as well as the African Studies Department, was offered a couple fellowships. But as long as you start early and like keep trying until you get something, I think you'll have success.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie Knowling. I'm a second-year master's student at the Ford School of Public Policy. I spent my summer with UN Women in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa. So I think I can just echo a lot of what everyone has said. I started out with, I kind of made a list of 10 things I knew I wanted. Started with number 1, I knew I wanted to be international. Second, I knew I wanted to work in some sort of organization that was working on gender, whether that be women's empowerment, leadership and participation, but something to do with gender. And then I kind of just worked my way down. And then from there, I kind of used LinkedIn, but in a different way. I Googled UN Women, and I saw where other people had worked before they got to UN Women, because UN Women, I guess, is kind of like the huge overarching, big, something that works with gender in the majority of countries around the world. And so I use that as my kind of jumping off point. So then I kind of, I guess in the nerdy way that I am, compiled an Excel sheet of everywhere that people had worked that sounded interesting to me, and then started researching those organizations, if they had internships, who the contact email was, if they had deadlines, all of that kind of stuff, and then kind of started sending out emails for information when they selected their interns, if they even had interns, all of that kind of stuff. And so I ended up just like cold emailing a lot of places with my resume and cover letter, and ended up with 2 internships, one in Ethiopia and then another one in India. And I'd already done 2.5 years of kind of like grassroots international development work, so I kind of opted to go with the UN to get a better sense of kind of what that level of policy was rather than the grassroots. And with regards to that, I would say have like your long cover. I mean, I'm sure you guys know this as graduate students, but like my big resume, and then I just cut and pasted what I thought was like appropriate for each organization, and then I had just a general cover letter that I essentially, literally, I think I used the exact same cover letter for the majority of the organizations, and then just like copied and pasted or changed the name, or maybe changed like what kind of programs I thought I could work in that they were doing, and like maybe a couple reasons like why I wanted to work there and why my background like fit in with them. But I mean, I really got lucky too. I had such an easy, I sent out probably like 20, and I got like 10 responses. Some didn't have internships, some had internships, and would consider my resume and application. And I got my first offer in India at the end of February, and then Ethiopia at the beginning of March. So I was a little late for the funding for African Studies and the Institute or International Institute, but the Ford School has a really great program that they have a lot of funding for students, so I got fully funded through them, and then I also got additional money from the Nonprofit Management Center that's located in the Ross School of Business. So I would say just apply to everything, cold email if there are places that you think are interesting, talk to alumni or talk to the career centers and see if they have contacts with alumni who are maybe working or have worked or whatnot. And I think LinkedIn's a great resource. I mean, I think it's either use it to connect with more people or also just see where you want to go and like the job you would ultimately like to have in the end, see where people have worked before they got there, and kind of use that as a resource. So.
Hi guys, I'm Emily again. just want to talk a little bit about how I found my internship because it's a bit unorthodox. I actually found my internship through a book. My sister gave me a book for Christmas that was called Volunteer Vacations, and it's just this long list of organizations that you can work with for just a couple weeks if you want to go on vacation and spend your time volunteering. And my sister saw it and she was like, oh, this reminded me of you. You're so weird. You're always trying to like squeeze these volunteer opportunities in. And so I was actually looking through it and found this organization that seemed really interesting to me. And so I emailed them. They're called Cornerstone. They're an HIV/AIDS nonprofit in Belize. Emailed them, just kind of sent them my CV and asked them, you know, do you think you have a place for me this summer? Turns out they had a Peace Corps volunteer who was working for them doing a needs assessment and basically just revamping all of their programs. And 2 weeks after she got there, she found out she was pregnant. And so she and her husband decided that they were going to go back to the States. So at this point, they were kind of in this situation where they really just needed someone. They needed someone to revamp these programs, do a needs assessment, and all this stuff. And they emailed me back and said, we would love you if you could come for more than 6 months. And at that point, I was, you know, just 1 year into my 2-year Master's in Public Health. And I thought to myself, there's no way I can do this. I have like 3 months for summer, and then I have to go back and finish my degree. And I thought it over for such a long time because it was such a great opportunity. And I, you know, thought to myself, I can get so much experience working here, really get to do exactly what I want, and I'll get more experience if I kind of extend it. Basically struggled over this for so long, talked to everyone I know, half the professors in school public health, and finally decided, you know what, I'm going to take a semester off. And I stayed there for 8 months, and it was the best decision I've ever made. It was great. I learned so much. I had an amazing time, and when I was done, I really got to sit back and say, all right, we did this together. You know, we really accomplished something during my time here. So I would tell you, don't be afraid to take an opportunity if it's presented to you. You know, if it's not exactly what you were hoping for, or not exactly what you thought you wanted when you started, if you get a great opportunity, don't be afraid to take it. And I mean, here I am. I had to stay an extra semester. I'll graduate in December, and boo-hoo, I'm, you know, a couple months behind, but it was worth it. And so I would tell you that, you know, just sometimes you happen across things in the strangest places. A book your sister gave you for Christmas that she just pulled off the shelf, probably because she forgot to get me something before, and she was in Barnes & Noble and was like, grab this for Emily. All right. So really just, you know, you can find it no matter where you look, sometimes in interesting places that you didn't think you'd look. And so that's really just my advice to you, to tell you, you know, if something comes along that just seems too good to be true, sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's going to be the greatest experience that you've ever had. So that's one thing I just wanted to tell you. And also, just wanted to let you know, as you're all trying to find your internships, we are here in the International Center, which is located in the Union. There's a map on some of the flyers we have out there. And both Christie and myself are graduate student peer advisors there. So if you come in during any aspect of your search, if you're just starting out looking, if you're trying to submit an application, if you have a cover letter you need revised, you're looking for funding, anything, if you come in, we'd be happy to help you. All of us have done international internships, we've been there, we know what you're going through, and we'd be happy to help you. And also, on your sheets that you have here, there's some events at the bottom. We have some more workshops and stuff going on. And I just wanted to point out two to you. First of all, the International Opportunities Fair is going to be on Thursday, October 25th in the Union Ballroom from 2 to 6, and there are going to be hundreds of international organizations there. People working all over the place, doing all kinds of different projects, and that would be a perfect place to network. You know, that way, and also those people work with other people who work with other people who know so many people in so many places doing so many things. Literally can't stress enough just how many people will be there and just kind of like the broad reach of that event. So if you are interested in an international internship but don't really know where to start, that would be an excellent place to kind of get out there and network with people who do this kind of work and work with students every day. And then on October 29th, we're going to have the funding for internships and research abroad. And even if you don't necessarily know which internship you're going to have by then, it's also good to kind of start early with the funding process, because a lot of the applications are kind of involved and take a while to get back to you. And as you've seen with some of the people on our panels, sometimes they don't turn out the way you want, or sometimes I actually applied for a fellowship through the School of Public Health, and they told me they didn't get it, that I didn't get it. 2 weeks later, they emailed me and said, "Oh, sorry, we sent you the wrong email. You actually got a fellowship." And it's like, and at that point, I was already freaking out. I actually also got a grant through the Center for Education of Women. So that, it does work. I keep telling people, and people always say, "Oh yeah, I've heard apply, apply, apply," but I've never met anyone who actually got one. I got a scholarship. I swear they do give away money. It's true. You haven't been lied to. So no matter what point in your internship you're in, on October 29th, the funding workshop would also be a good one to take advantage of. And then right now we're going to kind of open it up for questions to the panel. Feel free to ask a question of the whole panel, or if you just want to ask one person something specific about their experience, feel free to do that.
I have a question regarding the funding. It kind of seems like it's a bit of a chicken and egg sort of. How many of the funding is kind of tied back to already having that internship opportunity? Okay,
Some of it is really specific, and it would really depend on which ones you're applying to, but then there are others that aren't. Like for the Center for Education of Women, I hadn't actually decided whether I was going or not, but I submitted this proposal and I said, all right, my plan is to spend up to 8 months working in Belize with these issues. And the thing about that one is that you kind of need to connect it to women in some way. It's the Center for Education of Women. But a lot of them, you can do kind of a broad thing, like, oh, I am, going to work on health in this community, or I'm going to, work on this diplomacy internship in this region. And some of them will accept that kind of thing, but it helps. The more information you have, the easier it is, but there are some that you can kind of just tell them the broad scope of what you're looking for and what you've applied for, and they'll kind of let you go on that. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
Don't let deadlines bother you. I emailed WDI 2 months after the deadline, and they still had a little cash. So always ask.
Yeah.
Wasn't everything I wanted, but it worked.
Anyone else? All right. Any other questions? Yeah.
I have a question, Christie.
Yeah.
You said something earlier about being clear about your vision and what you want to do as your internship, but what if you know you want to have a vague idea of what you want to do? How do you craft that into the application?
That's a good question. I guess I would say that my idea was sort of vague, what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to work with volunteers, and I knew I cared about like the impact. It probably doesn't sound like that's a vague thing, but I didn't really know how to do it or what that would look like. And so I guess I would say look at where you're trying to go. Like if you have an idea of where you're going to be applying to. You're talking about funding applications or applications for internships? Both? Okay. So I guess if you're applying to a location, you'd want to craft it to what they are like. And then with your funding applications too, once you're applying for funding, you need to select which organization you're going to work for and just apply with that in mind. And so the same way that you would apply to the internship, crafting it to what it is that they do, how you can see yourself fitting in there. It might be a little bit of a stretch of the truth. You might not exactly know what you want to do, but to make it sound like you're really meeting the mission of that organization and that's in line with what you want to do. I think as far as funding application goes, I mean, I don't know if everybody's going to agree with this, but sometimes you might not know exactly what you want to do yet, but if you make it sound like you know exactly what you want to do, it might be good. And then once you get the funding, it really doesn't matter what you, not quite like that, but like you can bend what you do a little bit. Oh, okay.
And I know they have more locations. I know certain locations where I want to go and buy, but that I feel like is still kind of
Yeah, it's really hard in the School of Social Work because we don't know for sure until like January, February, and all the deadlines are in January, February. So I found that really challenging too, and I don't know if there are any other programs where you get placed through your school. But yeah, do your best. I think I was counseled to just kind of get in and say what I wanted to do. I think when I was applying for funding for my particular program, I think it was December and I still didn't know, like nobody had told me about this South Africa opportunity yet. So I started my entire funding application saying that I was going to go to Peru, and I was really interested sort of in working with these elderly population, but what I really cared about was, and this is how that was going to happen. So, you know, focus on your strengths and really what it is that you're interested in, but make sure it kind of fits into something in reality. So. Anyone else?
Can I make 2 plugs?
Yeah, go for it.
The William Davidson Institute is going to have, I think it's, you know, sort of get to know what they do, and they can talk more about that process. And I think that it's the dates to be determined, but if you go to the website, just Google William Davidson Institute at some time in November or December. And then Ross is having an India business conference. If you're interested in going to India, it's a great way to network and find out more about what's going on the ground. It's October 5th, and you can find out more by going to rossibc.org.
Anyone else? You have this wealth of knowledge before you. Nope.
Did you all find that I've gotten a little frustrated because I'm graduating people, and a lot of these internships are for people that are returning in the fall. Is that negotiable, or are there specifically ones, like opportunities for people that are done, that are not going to return students?
Well, mine was technically an opportunity for anybody. Cross-cultural solutions, so one of these placement programs, any of the placement programs really, will take people at any age, at any stage. It's just a matter of kind of getting exactly what you want. So if you have a location in mind, you can certainly choose that, but then the way that cross-cultural solutions normally works is they'll get your interest from you, but then they work on the ground with all of their partners. And it's depending on what the partners need, and they'll do their best to connect you with something that interests you and interests them. In their intern program, so normally it's just a volunteer program, so you do some sort of direct service. And their intern program is really just adding on an extra component of reflection so that you're having some sort of learning experience beyond just participating in the normal activities and the normal service. So that's probably not the best answer that everybody wants to hear, but mine was for anybody.
I mean, I think it's like if you email them and you plead your case, I think it's a lot of times they do that just because they have a large number of applicants that fit that criteria. But I think if you found an organization and you said, hey, look, this is what I'm really trying to do, and I understand it might not be the normal thing, but this is why you should do it, and just plead your case and sell it to them, like, I think, you know, most organizations are open to people who are going to be good and who are going to do the work and, like, add something of value to their organization, so.
Yeah, I would say I think a lot of the organizations, especially ones that don't have formal internship programs, are going to be pretty open to having anybody who wants to come help out, even if you did just graduate.
Mike, sorry. I know my company would have. So I separate the internship from the funding, and maybe that's where your frustration is. The company would take anybody if they wanted to come and spend time there. WDI, I don't think funds internships if you're not going, if you're graduated.
Yeah, that's the difference.
Yeah.
Also, if you're in that situation, one thing to think about is fellowships instead of an internship, because that would be, those are for kind of young professionals just coming out. You have the added benefit of a degree, and most of them are funded to some extent. They'll kind of help you, and it'll be a little bit more of a, I want to say, nurturing environment than just kind of throwing you out into the workforce. So you'll get a lot of experience, but also get paid at least living wages, and usually help you with housing and stuff if it's an international fellowship.
In terms of taking your field side, I was wondering if you guys think about like sort of like your proficiency in the local dialect and all. I'm curious if your experiences, whether you know the language and if you don't know the language, like how different the experiences.
I can definitely speak to this. So I did not know any MHIRT when I went to Ethiopia, and I thought, oh, like their second language is English, like everything from like secondary and high school were taught in English, so I was like, oh, this will be fine, like most people in the capital will know English. That was definitely not the case. And even like with the people that I worked with in my office, there were still many times when I would get a document that was like written in English, and it was like reading another language sometimes. So I don't know. I mean, I think there were good things and bad things. I think I learned how to work in that environment in a more professional setting than like I had done Peace Corps originally, and so that was something, I don't know. I think it went both ways. There were frustrating days and there were days where I was just like, can't handle this anymore, need to go home, and then the other days it was like, okay, I'm learning something, I'm gaining a skill that, you know, is going to be helpful down the line. So I don't know anyone else.
I can talk about it. I was in Chile, South America, and I before I went, I considered myself pretty, you know, proficient or well, fluent in Spanish. And going down there, if some of you know, Spanish is not a strictly like, you know, it's not the same in every region of the world. You know, so when I was going thinking, oh yeah, Chile, it'll be easy, you know, the accent won't be difficult at all. I got there, I was lost the first couple of days. Probably the first 2 weeks, it was a struggle because you really have to get your ear for it. I mean, even the dialectical Spanish is just completely different. So it took me a while, and especially talking to my mentor. She spoke very, very fast and was using terminology I'd never heard of before. So it's just a process where you kind of just have to be patient and then just kind of get your ear for it, and then eventually I think the communication will come. I mean, I'm sure that was probably the case with you, in Ethiopia. But I mean, even if you're in the language, it took me a while to get comfortable to speak and really get my point across. So, you know, patience is a virtue when you're at these international sites. I think that's just the biggest takeaway message from that.
I think just to add on to that, though, I think it's important to be clear if you don't understand something. So I guess I was able to speak in English at my internship this summer. It was difficult, actually, English to understand the first couple days. I didn't really understand what they were saying. But I think with that, it's important to ask and clarify and feel okay to ask questions. My other internship work has been in Guatemala, and when I first started going there, I knew Spanish, but not really. So it's really a process, yes, of patience, but also it wouldn't be ethical for me to act on something if I didn't really understand what the person was saying. So it's okay to ask questions. Like in Guatemala anyway, they really respect that I was speaking to them in their language, and they could see that I was trying my best, and now it's a lot better. So.
I have a question. So I've seen all the panelists have worked either in South America, Africa, or Asia. So how's the situation if somebody wants to go to Europe? Is it very different? Because it's not exactly development oriented or something?
Yeah, WDI is more development focused, and so that you know, but also the advantage is, you know, I didn't get that much funding in terms of compared to my colleagues. I mean, some people were making twice to 4 times what I was making for the summer, but the conversion rate from the dollar to the rupee is in my favor, so it's the opposite for the euro. That's one thing to take into consideration. But I don't know about everyone else's, but most of the programs focus on the 90% of the world that needs some type of development help.
So not just funding, how about finding opportunities? Is it like tougher, or do you have
No, there are a lot of opportunities, and we know a lot of people through the International Center who have had internships in Europe. Actually, both of the people here who are in charge of the Education Abroad office worked in Germany, and so it's not necessarily harder. So don't worry about that. And we know a lot of people who have had successful relationships, internships, in Europe. Freudian slip. In Europe, and so don't worry about it. There are a lot of opportunities available. Especially the hard part about Europe is that usually they would expect you to speak the local language. I think that's what deters people a lot. You know, you can go a lot of places and kind of get away with English. In Europe, they won't let you so much. So that would just be kind of like the one step back to European internships. But don't let that deter you. You can definitely
would
find
it
one.
be a setback in the opportunities available to students who don't speak the local language, or would it be just a setback in experience?
Just a setback to people who don't speak the language, but you would be able to find one. There are definitely opportunities available.
So I'm an international student, and I'm graduating this December. So I'm looking for opportunities in Europe as well.
Okay.
So I I'm interested mostly in Germany and Italy. So I got a lot of negative feedback saying that knowing the language is mandatory almost.
Yeah, that's one of the hard parts about it. They would probably expect you to speak German or Italian if you worked in those places.
And how does the visa thing work? Are there
How do visas work? It would depend by country, and you would have to go to the consulate or the embassy here in the United States in order to apply for those visas.
Yeah, it's all of those really specific questions that's the kind of thing that we do at the International Center. So
Yeah.
stop by and see us.
Yeah, we'd be happy to sit down and talk to you about it and work everything out. Anyone else?
Maybe if I could ask all of you, how did your internship go, and did things go as you expected, or did you have to kind of work in different ways than you might do here in this country?
I guess I can start. My internship was interesting. So I got to Ethiopia on a Monday and found out that the country director of my office had left the Friday before. So no one had emailed me, no one had told me, nothing. So I showed up to an office that was like just totally disorganized, like had so much on their plate, like they didn't know what they were doing. And then 3 weeks later, our main program specialist left. So my summer was just kind of spent doing my own thing in a project that they had kind of assigned me at the beginning. And then, I mean, I realized I wasn't really going to get what I expected to get out of it with regards to like complementing my academic studies from my first year. So I decided that I was going to use it as a year. I just used it essentially. I just emailed a bunch of like NGOs and potential people I thought I might want to work for and set up informational interviews and like ask them what they, what their process was for like working abroad and like how they did their hiring and what kind of programming they did. So my internship really kind of turned into more of like a informational job search kind of thing. But I did learn a lot. I learned a lot of like, I don't really want to work at a high level policy level just yet, so there were a lot more, although it kind of wasn't a great internship, it really taught me like what I want to focus on after graduation. So in that regards, it was like really nice that I could like, I now have a much more focused job search and I won't hopefully end up in a job that I hate because I didn't, I had this experience and I know the type of policy I want to work on afterwards. So it's kind of my summer.
Well, I went into my internship thinking that I was going to be doing pretty much all digitization work. So really boring, more or less data entry of metadata, which is really important for archives, but not very exciting. Fortunately, I ended up doing way more than that. So I did do like the metadata side of generating metadata and putting it. But I also did everything from curating digital exhibits to meeting with donors to emailing the Dalai Lama to say thanks for saying happy birthday to Mandela, like crazy, crazy things. Let's see, what else did I do that was exciting? We went to Cape Town on a road trip for work, which was really crazy to drop off archival documents to Dini Sebukwe, who is the son of a, more or less like a freedom fighter, if we talk about it in American terms, in the apartheid struggle, interviewed Mandela's last prison warder and did an exhibit on that. Just a huge variety of things, but the people I worked with were really supportive and were really welcoming to make me feel comfortable in South Africa because it can be a really strange space to put yourself into. It's much more dangerous, and just the idea of once it's dark you really don't go out by yourself, and there are lots of areas you don't go. As a white person, at least living in Johannesburg, where it is a lot grittier than, say, Cape Town. But overall, I had a wonderful experience and would highly recommend South Africa to anyone who wanted to go there.
I was in Bangalore, India, which is in the south. So I say that because the weather there is nicer than anywhere else in the country. So that was important. The internship was great from both a personal and a professional perspective. On a professional level, I worked with a startup of, I think it was 6 full-time employees and then another 6 interns. So it was 12 people total. And I came in at the right exact time to help them develop a strategy to enter new markets. And it was perfect because I got to work, essentially my boss was out of the country for 7 of the 10 weeks that I was there. So I got to take it and run with it, which was great. I got to do things that I've done before, which was good because I got to be better at it, and then I got to do things I've never done before, which is great because it was a learning curve. And then from a personal perspective, I got to travel around. I saw the Taj Mahal. I went to Bombay. I stayed on a houseboat for a few days in South India, part of the country called Kerala. I went to Hampi and rode a motorcycle, which is the best $6 I've ever spent in my life. But that's not the same thing Mackenzie talked about a little earlier. There were definitely days when I wanted to come home and it was difficult, and I was frustrated because it takes a lot more energy to communicate and to get around and to think differently. But there were far more days of just amazing experiences and opportunities and meeting cool people and doing interesting stuff. And if I could have, probably would have stayed another month, but it was a good experience all around.
I guess I talked a little bit already about what I did. I think it was definitely a good professional experience for me. It totally helped me solidify what I want to do in my future. I came out of that internship applying for a Fulbright research grant for next year. It was very clear in my head what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it, because I had had the experience working inside with international volunteers on the other side, like in the country where international volunteers go. Previously, I had only had sort of my own experience in the student group that I work with in terms of international volunteering. So it was really interesting to see why all these different volunteers were coming from all over the world, and then kind of what their experience was going through the process of volunteering. So even beyond like the actual work I was doing on the side, just in my social interactions, I was sort of getting a sense of what it was that I wanted to do for my future. I guess the work that I actually did too, going through an entire evaluation process, it's something I had just learned in my class in the School of Social Work, and it was so cool to be able to apply it right away. And the staff I was working with, they were just so impressed with my strategies for doing things. I was like, yeah, I learned it at the University of Michigan School of Social Work. It was cool to actually be able to practice things that were related to my career on the ground. I didn't expect that. Especially with cross-cultural solutions, since they usually do have these direct service placements. I thought they would kind of treat me like that too and have just little office tasks for me to do like all the other volunteers. But once the staff there really saw the skills that I had and the ideas that I was bringing to the table, we talked a lot. We just had a lot of discussions about our perspectives on international volunteering and global development and things like that. They realized what I could offer, and they started to give me some more responsibilities. And then, I mean, by the end of the first week, I literally had a page-long list of stuff they wanted me to accomplish. And they're like, I understand you might not be able to do all of this, but this is everything that we need to accomplish. So just get started. So I did, and I actually accomplished most of what they wanted. They were really impressed with, I don't know if it's just me, but they associated it with Americans, how hardworking we are and how like product-oriented we are. It was sort of a criticism and a compliment at the same time. Because I was accomplishing things so quickly, and they'd never seen anything like that before in the office where I was working. So I definitely learned a lot. I learned perspectives, and then on the side, like other things that I did, I was in Cape Town was my base. So I kind of say like outside of my work, I don't know if I really liked Cape Town. I got to learn a lot about it. It opened me up to a whole new section of history and the entire social situation in Africa. It opened me up to caring about what's happening in Africa. Not that I didn't care before I went, but once I got to see it and experience it and hear from people who had lived through some of the history, it made me want to ask more questions and learn about it and remember things so that I can share with other people. So it was fun. It was beautiful, and I got to go on a safari, which is something I always wanted to do as a child, but never believed that I would actually ever do. So that was good.
Yeah, so as I briefly mentioned before, you have to write a proposal for the MHIRT formal process. And that's kind of what, that's kind of the idea of what in particular you're going to study within the project framework of your program. So the project that I was involved in was looking at the biological and psychosocial factors of obesity in Chilean adolescents. So I, from a health behavior or health education standpoint, was more interested in social support and social networks trying to see if there was any association between the obese friends have obese friends, and kind of how that relationship might kind of make it worse, I guess, in the sense of that they would just have poor behaviors and poor physical activity behaviors, pardon me, and dietary habits because of these relationships. And so that's what I kind of thought I was going to be doing, and that's kind of what I wrote my proposal on, and that's kind of what I thought I would be doing but once I got there, it was a complete mess. They were saying, no, this is not what you're going to be doing. We don't have this data. You know, this is not possible. So what happened was that the first week I was there, my mentor was abroad, so I was just kind of there in the office, and they were just kind of getting me up to speed on the project, what data they have, what the data collection was like, kind of what studies could be possible. Eventually, my mentor came back, and she actually had an idea of what we could do in particular. And what we ended up doing was actually using an economic framework, which was interesting because I'm not an economist in any way. My economic knowledge is very, very limited. But we ended up using an economic framework by Grossman, looking at health capital, and particularly physical activity and dietary habits, and how those were health-promoting behaviors that could have direct effect on cardiovascular risk factors and metabolic syndrome. So what I ended up basically doing was writing a study and doing all this data analysis. So it was I don't want to say it was very tedious, but it was just basically research. I was writing a paper, doing data analysis, going back to my mentor, getting feedback, figuring out, okay, what other data analysis do I have to do? What is the meaning of this? And basically, what am I concluding at the end of the day? That was basically my internship. It was not as exciting as my colleagues here, but I mean, I did learn a lot. It helped me realize that I kind of want to go into research, especially with Latinos here in the United States. So, and probably in the area of obesity research. So it was a good experience in that sense, but I mean, by no means was it like very, very exciting. I mean, I did get to travel around Chile, which was great, and it's a beautiful country, beautiful country. And I mean, the only disadvantage for me is that I went during their winter, so that was the one thing I was not very, very excited about.